Thank you, delegates. Well, I move this motion, but the text is the work of many. And I want to start by acknowledging that the conflict between Israel and Palestine is an issue of great importance to many in our party and in the Australian community. It is of great importance because Labor is a friend of Israel. I am a friend of Israel. It is of great importance because Labor is a friend of the Palestinians. I am a friend of the Palestinians. And it is of great importance because we in Labor not only deal with the world as it is, but we do seek to change it for the better. And all who come to this debate do so in the hope of contributing to peace and to a just and lasting resolution of the conflict between these two peoples. And I want to thank everyone involved in this for the manner in which they have engaged to formulate and now propose this resolution, which I am confident reflects the collective view of the conference. This resolution makes clear the view of this conference is to continue to support the recognition and right of Israel and Palestine to exist as two states within secure and recognised borders. And it recognises the desire of this conference to recognise Palestine as a state. Labor has long supported and continues to support a two-state solution to this conflict. We support Israel's right to exist within secure and recognised boundaries and the creation of a Palestinian state. And we recognise that a just two-state solution will require recognising the right of both the Israeli and Palestinian peoples to live in peace and security. The hallmark of our approach has been our even-handedness and our acceptance of the legitimate claims by both parties. And we have been consistent in our approach to working towards the resolution of conflict between Palestine and Israel. We've been consistent in our criticism of actions which undermine progress, the resort to violence or the use of disproportionate response, the construction of new settlements in areas that will become part of a future Palestinian state, and the retrospective legalisation of settlements. And Labor will continue to call on both sides of the conflict to refrain from any actions that hamper peaceful outcomes for both the Israeli and Palestinian peoples. And we will continue to ensure that any decision we take contributes to a peaceful resolution of the conflict and to progress towards a two-state solution. It is, of course, an approach which until recently had been largely bipartisan. But in a shameful act, 5 days before the Wentworth by-election, Mr Morrison put his own domestic political interest before the national interest. He junked long-standing bipartisan foreign policy in a cynical attempt to win votes. It was a desperate political tactic which didn't work. It was a decision made against the long-standing advice of agencies, without cabinet consideration, without properly consulting Australia's partners and allies, and astonishingly, it was a decision made without consulting either the Israelis or the Palestinians themselves, whose agreement must be the foundation of any lasting peace. Well, the result of the chaos and confusion has been clear. Scott Morrison has caused offence to some of our nearest neighbours, harmed our international reputation and our nation's interests. And ever since, he's been trying to escape the problem of his own creation. This is a clear example of what happens when partisan domestic politics is put before national interest. Well, unlike Scott Morrison and the Coalition, Labor in government will take a responsible approach to foreign policy. We will seek and consider the advice of agencies. We will work with allies and partners, and we will always put our national interest first. This motion makes clear Labor's commitment to progressing a lasting peace and a two-state solution. It makes it clear it will be an important priority for the next Labor government. And can I thank all those involved for the maturity with which you have approached this discussion, which demonstrates, I think, the way in which our party is ready to govern. As Labor's Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, I commend.
As Penny said, this resolution is a product of many more people than Penny and myself, and I want to specifically acknowledge the consultation with Richard Miles and the long-standing work of Wendy Turner. In previous conferences, we've had resolutions on this topic that went forever. Every possible view and recent event would find its way into the preamble, and we could all find some words somewhere that we agreed with. Today, we haven't done that. We're simply noting all those resolutions and the views we previously expressed, and we note them because we haven't resiled from our commitment to security. Both Israelis and Palestinians have a right to be safe. Today's resolution focuses, though, on one issue, on recognition. Bill Shorten and Penny Wong have put a very reasonable case that recognition, the form of recognition and the precise timing of recognition should be a cabinet decision. We've seen the debacle of Scott Morrison with respect to Jerusalem, where decisions were taken and announcements made without a proper cabinet process, ignoring our agencies and blindsiding the region and our allies. It's another example of the difference between the failed advertising guy looking for a new slogan and a team that is ready to serve as a Shorten Labor government. But acknowledging that the decision should be made by Cabinet does not take away the responsibility and the right of this conference to provide its view. And the view of the conference will be clear if this is carried. We are calling on the next Labor government to recognise the state of Palestine. Recognition is the normal approach for Australia. Across the world, there are governments we believe are poor at governance. We recognise them. There are governments which we believe are responsible for human rights atrocities. We still recognise them. There are governments where we believe they're pursuing objectives that are hostile to our national interest. Yet for all these countries, we still recognise them as states. We held off recognising Palestine partly because it was one of the issues to be resolved in the final negotiation. But in recent years, particularly with the growth of settlements, we've seen the balance of those negotiations shift. I suspect this room is full of more negotiators than any other part of our country. And people in this room understand the implications of a bargaining table where one side of the bargaining table disproportionately already has most of what they want. No one today can see the momentum that seemed imminent in the days of Yitzhak Rabin, Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton. Some of us have always believed a resolution like this was required, but many people, like Bob Hawke, Gareth Evans, Kevin Rudd, have changed their views over time. Whether that view has changed because of comments and policies driven by Benjamin Netanyahu himself, or the fact that 2/3 of his cabinet are on record saying there will never be a Palestinian state, whether it be because the settlements are driving a wedge between Bethlehem and Ramallah all the way to Jericho, whether it be the military courts, the home demolitions, the restrictions on water, or the fact that we are now looking at what is currently the longest military occupation, we have reached the point where the arguments to wait have become thinner and the arguments for recognition have become stronger. This resolution is not anti-Israel. Since 1948, this country and this party has recognised and supported the people of Israel having a land of their own, and today we say the Palestinians also deserve a land of their own. At each of our state and territory conferences, there have been resolutions calling for this. None of them are a rejection of Israel. But they are a rejection of some of the hardliners who believe that occupation of another people can be permanent. They are a rejection of the largely US and Russian armed settlers who have moved to places like Hebron, wanting the local community to live in fear. Labor has always believed in a two-state solution, and today, conference calls on the next Labor government to recognise both of them. Two states, side by side, both secure, Israel and Palestine.
Thanks, Tony.